He kissed her at the airport and said, "I will wait forever." She believed him. She fought wars for him. She bled for him. She counted 7 years of sunrises thinking, "He's waiting. He's waiting." But the man who once said she was his entire world had already built a brand new one, complete with a wife, a son, and a home that no longer had space for her. Welcome to Afro-K romance fairy tale. On today's episode, you get a dose of betrayal, power, romance, love, unexpected encounters, and beautiful beginnings. If this is your first time here, make sure to like, subscribe, click the notification icon to get a reminder when new amazing stories drop, and send this story to friends and family who you think would love to watch it. And also tell me in the comments which city you're watching from. I'd really love to know. Now let's dive back into this amazing story. Diana and Koo was not a woman who broke easily. She had crawled through mud under live gunfire. She had watched teammates fall and kept moving because stopping meant dying. She had survived 42 months in classified territory, operating under a name that wasn't hers, eating meals she couldn't identify, sleeping in 3-hour rotations with one eye always open. She had done all of that and come out walking. But nothing, not one single moment of her military career, had prepared her for this Tuesday afternoon. The taxi smelled like pine air freshener and old leather. Diana sat in the back with her duffel bag between her boots and her eyes fixed on the window as Seoul moved past her in a blur of neon and gray sky. She hadn't told anyone she was coming home. Not her commanding officer's assistant. Not the one friend who still sent birthday messages to a number Diana couldn't use. And certainly not him. She wanted to surprise him. She had rehearsed it 100 times in the last 48 hours of travel. She would knock. No, she had a key. She would use her key. She would walk in and he would look up, and that face, that impossibly composed, terrifyingly handsome face, would crack open with something real. Something only she had ever seen from him. And he would cross the room and hold her, and she would finally, stop carrying the weight of 7 years alone. The taxi turned onto their street and Diana sat forward. The house looked exactly the same from outside. Same black gate. Same stone pathway he had personally chosen because she said she liked how it looked in winter. Same 2 potted trees flanking the front door that she had teased him about because a Mafia boss with decorative trees felt absurd to her. He had said, "I am whatever you need me to be inside this house." She paid the driver, stepped out, stood at the gate for just a moment with a cold Seoul air on her face and something warm and terrified and hopeful moving through her chest. She used her key on the gate, then walked up the stone path, then used her key on the front door. It swung open quietly, and the smell hit her first. Something cooking, not the food she made, not the recipes they had fumbled through together during their first year, not anything she recognized. A perfume too, light and floral, woven into the air of the hallway like it belonged there. Like it had been there long enough to settle into the walls. Diana stood completely still in the doorway. Her military brain was already cataloging fast. Women's shoes by the entrance. Small, neat, expensive. A child's jacket hanging on the lower hook of the coat rack. Her coat rack. A sippy cup on the hallway table. Sippy cup. She heard it then. Laughter. A child's laughter, bright and unself-conscious, coming from the living room. And then a woman's voice, soft, Korean, warm, saying something that made the child laugh harder. Diana's hand was still on the door handle. She should have left. Every trained instinct, she had said. Assess, regroup, do not engage until you understand the situation. But her feet moved forward on their own because this was her house and that was her life being laughed in, and she needed to see it with her own eyes before she could believe it. She stepped into the living room. The woman looked up first. She was beautiful in a quiet, effortless way. Dark hair, graceful features, wearing a cream sweater that looked soft enough to sleep in. She was sitting on Diana's couch with a little boy in her lap, maybe 3 years old, round-cheeked and bright-eyed and completely unbothered by the stranger who had just walked into his home. The woman's expression shifted from surprise to confusion to something careful and guarded. "Can I help you?" she asked in Korean, then repeated it slower, assuming perhaps that Diana didn't understand. Diana understood perfectly. 7 years in Korea's orbit had made sure of that. She didn't answer. Because at that exact moment she heard footsteps on the stairs. Measured, heavy, familiar. The kind of footsteps that had once made her feel safe in the dark. A turn. Koo Majok appeared at the bottom of the staircase. He was wearing a dark shirt, sleeves pushed to his elbows, phone in hand, eyes down at the screen, and then he looked up. And everything stopped. He saw her. The phone dropped to his side. His entire body went rigid. The composure that had made him legendary. The absolute stillness that his enemies described as the most terrifying thing about him. Shattered. Completely. Visibly. In a way Diana had only ever seen once before. The night he told her he loved her and couldn't pretend it wasn't true anymore. He looked like he had seen something impossible. He looked like he had seen a ghost. 'Cause he had. Diana held his gaze across the room. She did not shake. She was Diana Inij. She did not shake. But her voice, when it finally came, was barely above a whisper, and it carried every single one of the 7 years she had just survived. Who are they, Majok? It wasn't a question. It was a door swinging open onto something dark and enormous, and she already knew. She already knew. She was not going to like what lived on the other side. The little boy, completely unaware that the room had just collapsed, wiggled off the woman's lap and toddled toward Majok with his arms up, babbling, "Appa, Appa. Daddy, Daddy," in the cheerful, demanding way of small children who have never once doubted they are loved. Koo Majok did not move. Did not look at the child. Did not look away from Diana. His jaw was tight. His eyes were doing something complicated and vast and painful that Diana refused to let herself decode right now. "Diana," he started. "Don't say my name." Her voice cracked on the last word and she hated it. She pressed her lips together. Breathed through her nose. "Don't you dare say my name right now." The woman on the couch had gone very still. She was watching Diana the way people watch something they have been warned about, with recognition and dread, and a kind of resigned understanding. Which meant she knew. She knew who Diana was. That realization landed like a physical blow. Diana took one step back. Then another. Her duffel bag was still on her shoulder, and the strap was cutting into her collarbone, and she was standing in her own home feeling like the intruder, and something inside her chest was tearing with a slowness that was somehow worse than if it had been fast. She looked at Majok one last time. He hadn't moved. He was still watching her with that expression she didn't have a name for yet. Guilt and grief and something else. Something almost like terror. Not the terror of a man caught. The terror of a man watching something precious fall and being unable to stop it. 7 years, Diana said softly. "I was gone 7 years, Majok." He said nothing. She walked out. She did not run. She was Diana Inij, and she did not run. She walked back down the stone path, through the black gate, and back to the edge of the street. And she stood there in the cold soul air with her bag on her shoulder, and her hands completely steady and her heart in absolute pieces. She hailed another taxi. And only when the door closed and the city began moving past the window again, only then did she press her forehead against the cold glass and close her eyes. She had survived 7 years of war. She was not sure she would survive this. But what Diana didn't know, what would change everything, was that inside that house, Koo Majok had just picked up his phone with shaking hands. And the person he called wasn't the woman in the living room. It was his most trusted lieutenant. And what he said was 4 words. "Find out who lied." The hotel Diana checked into was clean, anonymous, and nowhere near their neighborhood. He paid cash. Gave a fake name out of habit. Took the room on the highest floor because 7 years of field training meant she never slept where she couldn't see what was coming. She sat on the edge of the bed in the dark for a long time. She didn't cry. Not yet. Crying required surrender, and Diana wasn't ready to surrender to this. Not tonight. Instead she did what she always did when the world became too large and too painful to hold. She pulled it apart piece by piece until it was small enough to examine. She opened her laptop. Pulled out the contacts she had spent years building across 3 continents. And she started digging. His name opened doors even in the digital dark. Koo Majok, head of the Majok syndicate, operating across Seoul, Busan and 3 international ports, feared and untouchable and obsessively private. She knew all of that. She had known that before she married him. She had loved him anyway because behind all of that he had been hers, completely, almost desperately hers, in a way she had never experienced with any other person. But now she needed to know who he had become while she was gone. The first file made her go still. 18 months after her deployment, 18 months, there had been a closed-door meeting between the Majok syndicate and the Park crime family. An alliance sealed not with contracts but with something older. A marriage arrangement. Koo Majok and Park Soa, daughter of the Park family's second elder. Quiet, educated, chosen. Diana stared at the name. Park Soa. The woman on her couch in the cream sweater. She cross-referenced. Found a photograph from a syndicate gala 2 years ago. Majok in a dark suit, Soa at his side, her hand in the crook of his arm. His face in the photo was composed and unreadable as always. But his eyes were empty. Diana had spent enough time studying Koo Majok's face to know the difference between a man who was present and a man who was simply standing somewhere. In that photograph he was simply standing somewhere. It should have made her feel better. Didn't. Because empty or not, he had stood there. He had let it happen. He had built a life, a child, a home, a family. And even if none of it looked like joy, it was still a life that had no room in it for her. She kept digging. And then she found it. A report. Internal. The kind that was never supposed to leave syndicate walls, but that money and the right pressure could surface from almost anywhere. Dated 7 months into her deployment. Asset confirmation. Inij, Diana. Confirmed by field contact. No recovery possible. Diana read it 3 times. Killed in action. Someone had told the syndicate she was dead. Someone with enough access and enough credibility that Koo Majok, a man who trusted almost no one and verified everything, had believed it. Had believed she was dead. She sat back slowly. The fury she had walked into that house with began to shift. Just slightly. Just enough to let something more complicated move underneath it. Because if he had been told she was dead, if he had genuinely believed he had lost her, then the 18 months before Soa made a different kind of terrible sense. Not forgiveness. Not yet. Maybe not ever. A sense. She thought about the way he had looked at the bottom of that staircase. The color leaving his face. That expression she hadn't had a name for. She had a name for it now. It was the face of a man whose dead wife had just walked back into the world. Diana closed the laptop. Pressed her palms flat on the desk. Breathe. Someone had told him she was dead. Deliberately. Specifically. With enough false evidence to make it stick. Which meant someone had wanted her gone. And wanted him to believe it completely enough that he would stop looking. Her military brain shifted into a gear that had nothing to do with heartbreak and everything to do with survival. This was no longer just a story about a broken promise. This was something calculated. Something that had been done to both of them. And Diana Inij had not survived 7 years in classified territory to come home and be anyone's quiet victim. She picked up her phone. She had calls to make. She didn't sleep. By 4 in the morning she had 3 sources confirmed and a shape forming in the darkness. Still incomplete but unmistakable enough to make the back of her neck prickle the way it always did before things got dangerous. At 6 she showered, dressed, and sat by the window watching Sol wake up with cold coffee in her hand and her mind running calculations. She was still sitting there at 7:43 when the knock came at her door. She hadn't given anyone this location. She had paid cash. Used a fake name. Her hand moved to the firearm she had no business having in a civilian hotel room before she was even fully standing. Diana. His voice. Through the door. Low, quiet, controlled in the way that told her he was working very hard at the control. She stared at the door. I know you're in there. I know you didn't sleep. I know you've been pulling files since midnight because that is what you do when something hurts you. You investigate it instead of feeling it. I'm not leaving. She crossed the room. Put her hand on the handle. Didn't open it yet. How did you find me? You're in my city, Diana. You have always been impossible to miss. She opened the door. He was in all black, no tie, and he looked like a man who had not slept either. He looked like a man who had spent the night in a private war of his own. He looked, and this was the thing she most did not want to notice, he looked exactly like the person she had loved most in the world. She stepped aside without a word. He came in. He clocked everything in 3 seconds the way he always did. The open laptop, the files she hadn't bothered to close, the untouched bed, the gun she had just put down on the nightstand. His eyes moved back to her face. "You found the report," he said. "Not a question." "Kia," Diana said. "Someone told you I was dead." "Yes. And you believed it." Something moved across his face. "I had a body, Diana. A confirmation. Documentation. 3 independent sources. I spent 4 months trying to disprove it before I—" He stopped. His jaw worked. "I believed it because the alternative was that you were alive somewhere and not coming back. And I couldn't. Another stop. I couldn't survive that version." The room was very quiet. "So you built a new life," she said. "I survived," he said. "There is a difference." "Is there?" Her voice was flat. "There is a child in my house, Majok. A little boy who calls you Appa and wears our bracelet on his wrist. You want to explain to me what kind of survival looks like that?" His expression cracked. "Just barely. Just enough." "The bracelet was," he exhaled. "His name is Sio. He was born 8 months into the arrangement. I didn't. It wasn't something I chose in the way you're thinking. But you didn't leave." "No. Even when it would have been cleaner to leave. He is a child, Diana. He didn't ask for any of this. I don't. I am not capable of walking away from a child because my life became complicated." And there it was. That was the thing that unraveled her completely because it was so entirely, painfully him. Koo Majok, feared across 3 countries, ruthless in every boardroom and back alley, and completely unable to abandon a small boy who had done nothing wrong. She turned away from him, faced the window. "Someone set this up," she said, keeping her voice even. "The false report. Timing. The alliance marriage appearing 18 months later. That was too fast, Majok. That was prepared. Someone wanted me out of your life long enough to rearrange it." She heard him go completely still behind her. "Someone inside the syndicate," he said quietly. "Someone who knew exactly how to make you believe I was gone and exactly how to fill the space I left." The silence that followed was a different kind of silence. Not grief. Not guilt. Danger. She turned back to face him. And for the first time since she had walked through that door yesterday, they were not estranged lovers standing in the wreckage of a broken promise. They were 2 people who had just realized they were standing in the middle of someone else's very deliberate game. His eyes met hers. And underneath all the pain and the fury and the 7 years of distance, something old and certain and completely ungovernable moved between them. "I thought you were dead," he said. Softly. Like a confession. "Every day for 6 years, Diana. Every single day." Her throat tightened. She said nothing. "And now you're standing here and I don't." His voice dropped. "I don't know how to be in the same room as you and not." He stopped himself. She felt it too. That was the problem. She felt every word he didn't finish. And neither of them noticed the black car parked across the street from the hotel. Or the man inside it, watching the window of Diana's room with a phone pressed to his ear. "She's alive," the man said quietly. "And she's already asking questions." Was. Then a voice on the other end. Cold, measured, unmistakably senior. "Then it's time to finish what we started." Diana made him leave before sunrise. Not because she wanted him gone. That was the problem. She wanted him to stay with a ferocity that frightened her, and she had not survived 7 years of war by letting frightening things make her decisions. So she pointed at the door, and he went. But not before he stood in the doorway for a long moment looking at her with those eyes that had always seen too much, and said quietly, "Don't go anywhere without telling me." "You don't get to ask me that," she said. "I'm asking anyway." She closed the door in his face. then stood with her back against it and her eyes shut and her heart doing something loud and inconvenient in her chest. She spent the morning building her case. By noon she had a name. Not the full picture, not yet, but a thread. A syndicate elder named Chairman Wu. 70 years old, impeccably dressed, the kind of man who smiled at funerals. He had been the one to broker the alliance marriage between Majok and the Park family. He had also been, and this was the thread that made Diana's blood run cold, the one who had personally delivered the Kia confirmation to Koo Majok 6 years ago. He had sat across from the man she loved and told him she was dead. He had watched Majok receive that news. Had watched him break. And then 18 months later had appeared with a solution. A ready-made bride from a well-connected family, a political arrangement disguised as compassion, and a child that cemented the alliance in a way no contract ever could. It was elegant. Diana hated how elegant it was. The question she couldn't answer yet was why. Why had Chairman Wu wanted her removed? What threat did Diana engage? A foreign military officer with no syndicate blood, posed to a 70-year-old crime elder powerful enough to rewrite the life of the most feared man in Korea. She needed more. And she needed it from someone inside. She picked up her phone and made a call she had been sitting on all morning. Rang twice. "I heard a ghost was walking around Seoul," said the voice on the other end. Deep, amused, Korean-accented English. "Hello, Ryan," Diana said. Ryan. Koo Majok's youngest lieutenant and the only person in the entire syndicate who had ever treated Diana like a person rather than a curiosity or a threat. He had taught her Korean curse words over terrible ramen during her first year with Majok and had cried, actually cried, at their wedding when he thought no one was looking. "Are you safe?" he asked, and the amusement was gone now, replaced by something low and urgent. "For now. I need information, Ryan." "Diana. Chairman Wu. I need everything." His movements over the last 7 years. His communications around the time the false report was filed. Any connection to my deployment assignment. A long silence. "You know what you're asking me to do," Ryan said carefully. "I know exactly what I'm asking," she said. "And I know you know this was wrong. All of it." Another silence. Longer this time. "Give me 6 hours," he said finally. "And Diana, don't meet with Majok again until you hear from me. There are eyes on both of you right now and you don't know who's yet." The call ended. Diana looked out the window at the gray Seoul skyline and felt the familiar settling of a mission taking shape, that cold, clarifying focus that had kept her alive through things that should have killed her. Someone had stolen 7 years of her life. Had stolen her marriage. Had stolen the family she and Majok had planned with the particular tenderness of two people who knew their world was dangerous and wanted one true thing inside of it. She was going to find out why. And then she was going to dismantle everything Chairman Wu had built, piece by careful piece. She nearly made it through the afternoon without seeing him again. Nearly. She had moved to a different floor, Ryan's warning sitting sharp in the back of her mind, and was eating a meal she didn't taste when her door opened with a keycard she had not given to anyone. Koo Majok walked in carrying food from the restaurant she had loved 7 years ago and had never mentioned to a single person in this city since her return. She stared at him. "How did you know?" "You always want comfort food when you're running calculations," he said simply. He set the bag on the table. Pulled out containers with the efficiency of a man who had done this before. Who remembered still after everything what she needed before she asked for it. She should have thrown him out. She sat down at the table. He sat across from her. Didn't touch his food. Watched her the way he had always watched her. With that complete, undivided attention that used to make her feel like the only solid thing in a shifting world. "I spoke to Ryan," Majok said. Diana's eyes snapped up. "When?" "An hour ago. He came to me before he came back to you. He told me what you found. About Wu. And..." Majok's expression did something slow and dangerous. "And I have been sitting with the fact that a man I trusted, a man who sat at my table and looked me in the eye and told me you were gone, did it deliberately. For 6 years I have mourned you, Diana. I buried you in every way a man can bury someone without a body. And he sat at my table for every one of those years and said nothing. The quiet in the room was the kind that had weight. Why? Diana said. Why would he do it? What do I have to do with syndicate politics? Majok was quiet for a moment. Then, you remember what I told you before you deployed? About the expansion into the southern ports. She remembered. He had been careful about it. Hadn't given her operational details, but he had told her there were people inside the syndicate who didn't want it. Who had interests that the expansion would threaten. Wu, she said slowly. Wu had partnerships in those ports. Silent ones. Ones that would have collapsed the moment my expansion went through. Majok leaned forward slightly. I was going to push it through regardless. Had the votes. But then you deployed and I. He stopped. When I thought you were dead, I didn't care about the ports anymore. I didn't care about anything for a very long time. Diana absorbed this. He removed me to break you. He removed you to make me manageable, Majok said. A grieving man doesn't build empires. A grieving man signs whatever is put in front of him and doesn't ask the right questions. Including a marriage arrangement. Including that. The word landed between them and neither of them looked away from it. Soa, Diana said carefully. Does she know? No. She is. She has never been anything but honest about what the arrangement was. She didn't choose it any more than I did. But you have a son. Yes. And you're not going to walk away from him. No. I'm not. Diana nodded slowly. She had known that answer before she asked the question. It was one of the things she had loved most about him. His absolute, immovable loyalty to people who needed him. She had just never imagined being on the wrong side of it. So what does this mean? She said quietly. Not accusing. Genuinely asking. What does any of this mean for us, Majok? He looked at her for a long time. And then he reached across the table. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull back, and put his hand over hers. Her breath caught. It means, he said, that someone took 7 years from us. And I am not willing to let them take anything else. His thumb moved across her knuckles. Slowly. Deliberately. The way it used to when they sat together and he thought she was asleep and he didn't know she could feel every careful movement and loved him for it so much it was almost unbearable. Diana looked down at his hand on hers. Every wall she had been building since she walked through that front door was doing something inconvenient. You have a wife, Majok, she whispered. I have you, he said. I have always only had you. If this story is gripping you the way I think it is, and I know it is, do me a quick favor right now. Hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and share this with someone who loves a story that hits hard. And drop your city in the comments. I want to know exactly where in the world Afro-K romance fairytale is reaching tonight. Now don't go anywhere, because what happens next will absolutely wreck you. What neither of them knew was that 2 floors below, in a room booked under a corporate name, a woman was sitting on the edge of a bed with her hands folded in her lap and her eyes completely dry. Park Soa. She had followed him here. And she had heard every word. Park Soa was not what Diana had expected. She appeared at Diana's door 20 minutes after Majok left, and she didn't knock timidly or hesitate on the threshold. She knocked the way a woman knocks when she has already decided she is done being quiet. 3 firm, deliberate strikes. Diana opened the door with her hand instinctively at her side. Old habit, and they stood there for the first time without a living room between them and a child as buffer. Just 2 women looking at each other across a doorway that represented everything complicated about both their lives. May I come in? Soa said. Her English was careful and precise. Diana stepped aside. Soa entered. Sat down without being invited, which Diana respected despite herself. She folded her hands in her lap and looked up with eyes that were steady and tired in equal measure. I know who you are, Soa said. I have known since before the wedding. Chairman Wu told my father that Majok's first wife had died on deployment. But the way he said it, she paused. Something about the way he said it made me ask questions he didn't expect me to ask. Diana said nothing. Listening. I found enough, Soa continued. Not everything. Not what you found. But enough to know that whatever I walked into was not a clean situation. Her jaw tightened slightly. I want you to know that I have never loved him. I want you to know that I have never pretended to. We have been civil, careful. Two people doing what their families required of them. And Seo, Diana said quietly. Something moved across Soa's face. Fierce and immediate and completely unguarded. The first fully unguarded thing Diana had seen from her. Seo is my son. Whatever else is complicated about this situation, he is not. He is 3 years old and he is not responsible for any of this. I know that, Diana said. I need you to know that I am not your enemy, Soa said. I need you to know that because what I am about to tell you requires you to trust me for approximately 5 minutes, and I understand if that is difficult. Diana pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. Talk, she said. Soa reached into her jacket and placed a small drive on the table between them. Chairman Wu is moving against Majok, she said. Not eventually. The false report, the marriage arrangement, the alliance. None of it was just about the port expansion. That was only the beginning. Wu has been systematically positioning himself to take control of the entire syndicate. He needed Majok broken and compliant long enough to put the pieces in place. She nodded at the drive. That contains 3 years of communications. My father didn't know what Wu was building when he agreed to the arrangement. When he found out, he gave me those files. As an exit. Diana stared at the drive. Why are you giving this to me, she said. Why not go directly to Majok? Because Majok will go straight to confrontation, Soa said simply. He will take that drive and walk into Wu's office, and it will become a war inside the syndicate that will get people killed and give Wu exactly the chaos he needs to make his move. She met Diana's eyes. But you are military intelligence. You know how to dismantle something quietly. From the inside. Before it sees you coming. The room was very still. Diana picked up the drive. She called Ryan at 9. Majok at 9:15. Had them both in her room by 9:45 and spent 30 minutes laying it out. The drive, Soa's intelligence, the full picture of what Wu had been constructing while Majok grieved and complied and didn't ask the right questions. Majok listened without interrupting. This was one of the things about him that had always undone her. That absolute stillness when information mattered. No reaction until he had heard everything. No wasted movement. Just those eyes moving between her face and the documents, and processing with a cold efficiency that reminded her exactly why this man ran an empire. When she finished, the silence lasted exactly 4 seconds. Then Majok looked at Ryan. Find out who else Wu has aligned internally. I want names by morning. Ryan nodded and left without a word. Majok looked back at Diana. You trusted Soa, he said. Not accusatory. Observational. She had every reason to protect the situation as it was, Diana said. She gave that up. That's not nothing. He studied her. You are extraordinary, he said quietly. Do you know that? 7 years gone and you walk back in, and within 48 hours you have done what I have not been able to do in 3. I had motivation, Diana said. Yes, he said. So did I. I just didn't know what I was looking for. He was standing close. Too close. The distance between them had been collapsing all evening in increments small enough to ignore individually, and impossible to ignore collectively. She could see the faint scar above his left eyebrow, new from after she left, and the way his jaw was set and the particular way he was looking at her that she had spent 7 years trying to reconstruct from memory, and had never quite managed because no memory was ever sufficient. Majok, she said. Warning. I know, he said. This is not resolved. I know. There is so much that is not resolved. Diana. Her name in his mouth, low and careful, the way he had always said it when he wanted her full attention. I know. I know all of it. I am not asking you to resolve it tonight. Then what are you asking? He reached up slowly and touched her face. Just his fingertips. Just the line of her jaw. Like she was something he was not sure was real yet and he was checking. I am asking you, he said, to let me stand here for one more minute. Just like this. Because for 6 years I believed I would never. His voice dropped. Just one more minute, Diana. She should have stepped back. She was Diana Inij, and she was disciplined and precise, and she did not make decisions based on the way a man's voice broke on her name. She stayed exactly where she was. His forehead came down to rest against hers. Slowly. The way it had at the airport before she deployed. That same gesture, that same unbearable tenderness from a man the world believed was incapable of it. Her eyes closed involuntarily. His hand curved along her jaw. She could feel him breathing. Could feel the careful control he was maintaining and the effort it was costing him. I'm so angry at you, she whispered. I know, he said. I don't know if I can come back from this. I know that too. Then why? Because I would rather stand in the middle of your anger, he said quietly, than be comfortable anywhere you are not. Something in her chest broke open. Not cleanly, not forgivingly, but open. She pulled back before it became something she couldn't walk back from. Put 2 steps between them and turned toward the window and breathed through it. Go, she said. We work the woo problem tomorrow. Clean. Professional. Was. Good night, Diana, he said. She heard the door close. She pressed her fingers to her jaw where his hand had been and stood there in the dark for a long time. At midnight her phone lit up. Ryan. She answered immediately. What did you find? His voice was different. Tight in a way that made her spine straighten. Diana. Who knows you've been pulling files. He knows about the drive. Beep. He's called an emergency council meeting for tomorrow morning. He's going to move against Majok before we can move against him. How long do we have? 8 hours. Maybe less. She was already reaching for her jacket. There's something else, Ryan said. Tell me. The person who filed the original false Kia report. The field contact who confirmed your death to Wu 7 years ago. A pause that lasted exactly long enough to be cruel. Diana. It was someone from your own unit. The room tilted. Someone you deployed with, Ryan continued quietly. Someone who has been on Wu's payroll since before you ever left for Korea. Diana stood completely still in the center of the hotel room. 7 years. A destroyed marriage. A family she never got to build. A life split open at the seam. And somewhere inside all of it, a betrayal that had started even closer to home than she had ever imagined. Send me the name, she said. Her voice was ice. The message came through 30 seconds later. She read it. And for the first time since she had come home, Diana Inij's hands were not steady. And that is where we leave Diana and Majok tonight, standing at the edge of something that could save them or consume them entirely. The truth is out. The enemy has a face. But the deepest betrayal is one Diana never saw coming. What happens at that council meeting? What does she do with a name that changes everything she thought she knew? And can 2 people who were stolen from each other find their way back when the world keeps burning around them? If this story moved you, and I believe it did, hit that like button right now, subscribe so you never miss a new episode, and share this with every person in your life who deserves a story this good. And drop your city in the comments below. I read every single one and I want to know exactly where in the world you are watching from tonight. This has been Afro-K Romance Fairy Tale, and we are nowhere near done. The full story of Diana and Koo Majok continues. The betrayal runs deeper than either of them know. And the war, the real war, is just beginning.